Welcome back, history enthusiasts. Today we embark on a captivating journey to uncover the fascinating history of Liberia, a nation with a rich and complex past. Nestled on the beautiful west coast of Africa, Liberia is a country with a rich and complex history. But what makes Liberia truly special? Well, let's dive right in and find out. Liberia, often referred to as the land of the free, is a nation known for its lush tropical rainforest, stunning coastline, and warm hospitality. Its location on the Atlantic Ocean makes it a place of breathtaking natural beauty. But Liberia's story goes far beyond its enchanting landscapes. It is a nation with a remarkable past that has shaped its present. In honor of all Liberians, I want to start this story from the beginning. The country known as Liberia has been inhabited by humans for many centuries. Liberia, in a sense, was a land of hope for many African tribes way before the Europeans arrived in Africa. There are three major groups of languages families in modern-day Liberia. There are the Mande-speaking people, the Kru-speaking people, and the Mel-speaking people. The Mande-speaking people consist of tribes such as the Va, Mano, and Pele. The Kru-speaking people consist of the Basso, Grebo, Klao, and the Kran. The Mel-speaking people consist of Gola and Kisi. Of course, there are other tribes in Liberia that do not fit in these major groups, like the Fulanis or the Fantis, but they are equally important to modern Liberia. According to oral accounts, the earliest tribes to inhabit modern-day Liberia were the Gola and the Kisi people. They claim that they met tiny people or pygmies when they settled on the coast. They were followed by a Kru-speaking tribe called the Dey, shortly after, who came from present-day Ivory Coast. The Dey were then followed by their tribal cousins, the Basso, Kran, Gribble, and Krus, which are called the Klao. Historians suggest that the split of the Songhai and Ghana Empire pushed many of these tribes towards the West African coast. It is also possible that the expansion of the Akan people played a role in pushing the Kru people from Ivory Coast towards modern-day Liberia. The last group of people to migrate to the Green Coast was the Mande-speaking people. After the split of the Mali Empire, many groups such as the Va people moved south in search of a better life. They were followed by other Mande-speaking tribes. So now that we have a better understanding about the indigenous tribes of Liberia, let's talk about the arrival of the Europeans. It is a common misconception that the repatriated blacks from America were the indigenous tribes' first encounters with outsiders. This couldn't be further from the truth. The earliest known Europeans to visit the Green Coast were the Normans from France, who came in the 14th century, 1364. The Normans built a trading center in Basso. In 1461, a Portuguese explorer called Pedro de Centra arrived on the Green Coast. He was responsible for naming places and rivers in Liberia, even though the locals already had names for them. This is the reason many of Liberia's capes and rivers' names are Portuguese. For example, de Centra named the cape he arrived at Cape Monserrato, and then went on to kidnap a local man and take him back to Portugal. De Centra also is responsible for naming Cape Mount, Cape Palmas, River Cess, and the St. Paul River. But most importantly, de Centra was the man credited with naming this part of Africa the Green Coast, or the Pepper Coast, after seeing the abundance of Malagueta peppers on the coast. So for this part of the video, the term Green Coast refers to modern-day Liberia. The Dutch would also come to the Green Coast to explore in 1626, followed by the English and then the French. Of course, the influx of Europeans explorers on the Green Coast came with a rise of the slave trade in this part of West Africa. But fortunately, the Green Coast was amongst the regions of Africa with the lowest amount of slaves taken in the transatlantic slave trade. This is because Europeans viewed the inhabitants, mainly the Kru-speaking people, as bad business, as they would often revolt or exterminate themselves to avoid bondage. The second reason was that the Kru-speaking people were regarded as masters of the sea and were hired to help Europeans' ship navigate the ocean. Now let's talk about the birth of the nation of Liberia. The founding of Liberia is in large based on the problems created by slavery in America. There were individuals who spoke against slavery because they believed it was in violation of the laws of God. Others were against it for other reasons. These individuals were called abolitionists. In 1808, the United States abolished the importation of slaves. At that point, there were already a little less of 1 million slaves in America, and this became a problem for some. The first problem was that some blacks had become free, either by buying their freedom, escaping, or being born free. The second was that there were already many uprising rebellions against slavery during this point. The Nat Turner Rebellion of 1831 was a notable rebellion in this period, and many white Americans believed that these free blacks had to go. The American Colonization Society, founded in 1816, was a philanthropic organization based in the United States. It emerged during a time when the question of slavery and the status of freed African American slaves was a pressing issue. The primary goal of the ACS was to address the challenges posed by slavery by establishing a colony in Africa where free slaves could be repatriated. The society believed that repatriation would provide the free slaves with greater opportunities for a better life. The ACS received support from prominent figures such as Henry Clay, Francis Scott Key, and Bushrod Washington, a nephew of George Washington. These individuals believed that colonization would not only address the issue of slavery, but also prevent potential social unrest. With the support of these influential figures, the ACS embarked on its mission to establish a colony for repatriated free slaves in Africa. This endeavor would eventually lead to the founding of Liberia. On November 5, 1817, Samuel John Mills was appointed by the society to go and purchase land in Africa. Mills passed through England for the purpose of seeking British permission to resettle free slaves in what is present-day Sierra Leone. At this time, Sierra Leone had been established for the American slaves who fought on the side of the British in the American War of Independence. However, after arriving in Sierra Leone, the colonial government in Sierra Leone declined John Mills' request for an ACS colony in Sierra Leone. Mills left and went to Sherbro Island. Sherbro Island at the time was inhabited by many tribes with different confederations. On the island, Mills met a native of Sherbro named John Kazell. Kazell had been kidnapped as a child and sold into slavery before ending up in Charleston, South Carolina. When the British forces invaded South Carolina, Kazell chose to fight alongside the British, and he was amongst the slaves the British resettled in Sierra Leone. Kazell would go on to help John Mills to meet with the Sherbro Kings in acquiring land. John Mills would die shortly after on his way back to America to get the free slaves. Millsburg in Liberia was named after him for his efforts. The ACS organized the first expedition, which set sail in February 1820. They arrived in Sherbro on March 9th. However, the location proved to be unsuitable for the settlement due to conflicts with local tribes and inadequate resources. Determined to find a more suitable site, the ACS leadership led by ACS agent Eli Aries set sail again, this time heading south to Cape Musserado. In December 1821, the U.S. Navy schooner Alligator, under the command of Lieutenant Robert F. Stockton, sailed down Africa's windward coast to anchor off a rocky headland known as Cape Musserado. The Alligator's usual assignment was to patrol the area for American ships engaging in the transatlantic slave trade, which the United States had outlawed 13 years earlier. The two men spent 4 days ashore, negotiating a contract with local leaders to purchase a narrow tract of land that scholars estimate covered about 140 acres. Payment would come in the form of trade goods, including guns, gunpowder, tobacco, rum, tableware, utensils, shoes, hat, umbrellas, and mirrors, altogether roughly worth about $7,000 in today's money. Both parties also pledged to live in peace and friendship forever. Aries recorded the deal in a careful script on the front and the back of a single sheet of paper. He signed it along with Stockton and 6 local leaders who referred to themselves as Peter, George, Zoda, Lone Peter, Governor, and Jimmy. They were called kings in the contract, although they were not monarchs in the European sense. The rating agreement, not unusual for the era, if astonishingly casual to the modern legalistic mind, is the founding document of the nation that would become Liberia. Cape Mesurado offered a natural harbor and fertile land, making it an ideal location for the settlement. The settlers disembarked and began establishing the groundwork for their new home. However, shortly after the arrivals of the settlers, relations with the natives would take a bad turn. The Day people who occupied the Cape did not accept the treaty signed by King Peter. The first deadly conflict between the settlers and the indigenous Liberians, the Day Settler War of 1822, resulted from the violent means in which the ACS acquired the land for Cape Mesurado from the Day. The tribal wars between the native tribes and settlers would go on to 1847 and after, when the Republic of Liberia was founded. Okay family, tune in next time for part 2 of the comprehensive history of the Republic of Liberia. Make sure you like, comment, and share this video with your loved ones. I think this is quite interesting as Liberia served as the first republic, the first independent republic in Africa. So I think every African should learn the history. So once again, thank you for tuning in to the Daily African. I love you. Share and subscribe. Tune in for part 2 of the comprehensive history of Liberia. Thank you.